We are right at 6 o'clock. Want to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out for this, our next session in the Nguzo Saba 365 study group. We get together every week, talk about something related to us, our people, our history, our struggle, whatever the case may be, something related to us, something that interests us, and engage it from a values discussion type perspective, consistent with the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles and all of that. Tonight, we agreed to have a discussion here on this topic of womanism or feminism. And I guess what I had in mind, I wanted to share just as a quick opening that sister author Alice Walker is regarded as the originator of the term womanism, right? In one of her publications from 1982. And she has been known to say that feminism is to womanism what lavender is to purple. And, consistent with that color characterization there, I think I see a bit more of a contrast between the two, at least the way I understand the distinction between them. And since we're here in the Women's History Month, which we regard as Black Women's History Month, and we celebrating our sisters, we decided to have this conversation talking about the distinctions between womanism and feminism, or perhaps more specifically, Black womanism and or Africana womanism and Black feminism, and what that means in terms of how our sisters understand themselves and assert themselves in the world, and this wasn't intended to be a male-dominated conversation, right? We got strong sisters in the group who lend their thoughts and opinions on it, but it's also something that brothers have some opinions on and everything, and we're open to all of our input on these things. So with that, I know my intent in terms of my contribution was to discuss Africana womanism as I understand it, and that's principally informed by the writings of Dr. Clenora Hudson Weems, who wrote the book Africana Womanism, Reclaiming Ourselves. She's a professor at the University of Missouri, I believe it is. I think she's a language professor, not a history professor, perhaps language, but nevertheless, she laid out this theory of Africana womanism and defined 18 characteristics that outlines what it means to be an Africana womanist from that perspective. And that's at the center of my understanding of it. So I wanted to share that. But we had some good discussion amongst ourselves leading up to this, and some excellent entries to inform the discussion. And there's no way we can fit all of this good stuff in an hour discussion. But, the intent was to share some material so that we could form some opinions that we could get together here.
That's the photo booth. That's not going.
Have a good discussion about. So with that being said, I wanted to find out amongst the people who are here, who had the opportunity to take a look at some of the material. And if anybody has some opening comments, this is a dialogue here, not just like a presentation. So I like to get some feedback from some of our other participants, and then lead into the discussion about Dr. Hudson Weems' work. Anybody? Brother Quayle, you and I had some good discussion. Of course, me and Sarah had some good discussion about this too. And I suspect, I know Sarah had an opportunity to take a look at some of the material that was sent out. Let's see. Let me do this.
Brother Suja, I do have a comment before you get started. Okay. Just to emphasize a point, you mentioned that that this is not going to be a male-dominated discussion, and for IAKG, it should not be.
Right.
But I will say this, that it is important for men to be amongst other men having a discussion about what we would call women's issues. Some brothers say, well, that's not our thing. That's something that's the sisters' struggle. And I just want to say that that is as that is as wrong as two left shoes.
Yes.
Because there is no their struggle and our struggle. There is only our struggle. If I can, well, I was going to make a reference to Obama's. There are no red states and blue states, but Obama was just wrong when he said that. But
Yeah.
the thing is, in a community, there is no sisters and brothers, sisters things, brothers things. There are no artificial divisions like that. You know, there are our things, our issues, and so the brother's voice is important to be heard, and brothers should honor our sisters on these topics by letting them take the lead. And okay, I had to turn and look at my wife right there and make sure she didn't throw something at me for saying letting them take the lead. But the sisters have taken the lead, and we have to be there to support, but to support them full-throatedly and not hold anything back in agreement or disagreement. You know, as the saying goes, iron sharpens iron.
Yes, indeed, brother. I almost want to applaud after you said that. I couldn't agree with every word of that anymore. I mean, having thoughtful discussions about what it means to be woman gives us the opportunity to evolve beyond the diminished perceptions of women that men are raised with in this society. You know, those of us who have evolved past that perspective and that understanding of things have a responsibility to engage with our brothers on those things, you know, and, you know, to help in this ongoing process of human perfection, you know. So I couldn't agree with what you said anymore. At the same time, you know, these types of conversations, and that won't happen here. Let me see. Let me let Akira in. That won't happen here, but I've had, like, in the study group down in Long Beach, you know, we had quite a robust crowd around these types of discussions. And we, as men, well, I would say, I'll speak for myself as the host or the coordinator. I found myself spending more time than I intended clarifying what I wasn't saying, you know, in response to some of the perceptions that activist women have about where men stand or what men think on women issues. That aligns with what you just said, you know, in many ways. So I guess, you know, reflecting twice on it, I guess I probably brought some of that energy here, you know, with it, and just wanted to make it clear that, you know, we recognize their challenges to patriarchy, and we don't advance that here in any way, and we give them the space to speak for themselves about who they are and what it means to be women, you know. And certainly we have a voice to be heard in that, because, you know, they're our life partners. But I yield the floor to them on discussions about women and what it means to be them with a highly tuned ear, though, you know. So thanks for that, brother. I guess I was about to, as to not just throw it completely to you all. I was going to just briefly share a couple of quick references from this piece that was sent out titled "Black Feminism and Womanism," which I'm finding to be an excellent piece, an excellent paper. It can't be called an article. It's a 20-page or something to that almost to that degree. And she breaks it down, all of the different aspects of it. But I just wanted to speak generally to the distinction between feminism and womanism broadly, as I understand it. To kind of set the context for a discussion about those two in the context we've defined. And I guess generally speaking, I see womanism as the author here. Rose Brewer is her name, as she outlined here, saying that it offers or it propagates an intersectional analysis, organizing ideas which emphasize the multiplicity of oppressions that women face, and they take a strong position. Feminism, Black feminism, takes a strong position against white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, right? And they talk specifically about the need to dismantle the system of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy before Black women's oppression can be ended. So feminism is a broad engagement with the oppression that women face. And my understanding of it in the simplest terms is one where it engages the struggle from an exclusively feminist standpoint, meaning a woman in isolation, a woman as woman. Whereas womanism, at least the theory as outlined by Clenore Hudson Weems, centers womanism and woman in family. Feminism has evolved to represent a broad swath of the LGBTQ community. There are several movements that are infused with that from a Black feminist perspective. So that's a departure from the traditional family-centeredness of womanism. And that's not to say that womanism is hostile or dismissive of the LGBTQ perspective, or that women are LGBTQ and they face they fall within the limits of what womanism represents too. But there's also no disputing that womanism, as defined by Clenore Hudson Weems, is centered in a cultural grounding, which reflects on womanism in the context of what we would call a traditional family centeredness as a foundation, right? So that's my understanding, and I kind of wanted to share that to kind of kick off the discussion and just ask for, since Sarah has her hand up, Sarah to offer some perspective on the opening or what she's read about this. Go right ahead.
I was just going to say what I got from this. This is one of the parts I was able to read. I felt like Black feminists, it seemed like that was more political. And womanism was more inclusive to women as a whole.
Yeah.
I don't know if that could be said, or has anybody else got a similar thing from that?
I think that's fair to say. Feminism has a broad history and a lot of structural organization out there that's connected to it, that defines itself in those terms, right? There's a movement and decades of work that is labeled and defined as that. So it certainly has a political energy to it that could be linked to womanism, and I don't think womanism would reject the a political consideration, but I think I would agree that feminism has a more political tinge to it, at least at this point. I should mention too, of course, since the Nguzo Saba study group, I know Dr. Karanga has written on, has a Kawaida conception of womanism, and Tiamoyo Karenga and Chimuko Tambo have written about that. I looked up some of their writing and stuff before I got here. Dr. Karenga, I'm sure he wrote, I know in last year's paper, he wrote a tribute to Ida B. Wells, who is regarded as a early womanist or feminist, both, I think. I know she's connected, she's referenced in womanist literature. He wrote an article about her. So there's a Kawaida perspective on womanism too. But I was introduced to Clenora Hudson Weems as the original theorist on it through Dr. Karenga. I think she bears a standing as the I guess I would say official or recognized originator of the idea. Dr. Quayle, you know something about that.
Yeah, I understand her to be, if not the originator of the term, of the word, she certainly is the person who has defined it. She has literally written down a definition and description, and she's written some essays on that topic. She is the person to go to understand what it is, even if she wasn't the first person to use that term. Yeah. But I also wanted to make a comment about the politics of feminism. I think that Sarah pointed out something very insightful there. You know, feminism is born out of a struggle that's 200 years old. White women seeking to be recognized legally in the Constitution, and that recognition came with the 19th Amendment in 1920, giving white women the right to vote. Even though Black women sought to form a coalition with the white suffragists, the white suffragists basically told them, if we let you in, you're going to be a political liability. People are going to not support us politically if they see us as standing side by side with African women. And indeed, the African American women had issues that went beyond political, but had to do with reproduction, had to do with self-defense and culture, and the white women didn't want to engage those things. And so I think this points out a fundamental difference between the mainstream feminist movement and even Black feminism, which expresses itself in political terms, but largely in cultural terms. There is a desire not just to be equal according to the law, but there is a need to rip up the ideas and concepts that uphold these structures that support the denigration of women based on race. So I'm just giving my 2 cents on what I think was a very insightful statement that Sarah made.
Well, and I'm glad you did. It was important to make that historical offer that historical perspective, you know. And I didn't have it at as a point of reference to take it all the way back to that beginning. I was thinking in terms of the feminist movements of the 60s and 70s and stuff. You know what I mean? But it absolutely is appropriate to take it back that far, and to use that as a defining distinction. You know, the way they refuse to support the sisters, the Black women, in that way, as a way to distinguish them. Let me see. Anybody else? Akira, I see you pulled in. You got any? Did you have an opportunity to take a look at the material? You got any perspective on this? Any questions, comments?
Yes. I really don't have much to say about the parts of feminism that existed before me, because for me it's history, and I think that's important. It's extremely important, actually. You know, we're how things got to the way that they are now. But I'm very concerned with like contemporary ideas of feminism, like Dr. Quayle was just talking about, and it's maybe it's not even just new, but it's not about being equal at all. I think that right now what I see on the internet a lot is a matter of being like completely independent or superior. Those are the two stances that I think that a lot of people are taking with their idea of Black feminism. Where it's like, one is we don't need men for anything at all, and having help from a man in any type of way shows a sign of weakness or dependency. And the other is that, yeah, it's okay to have men because you can use them for what they're good for, but the role should be reversed to what when people think of patriarchal oppression, it should just be switched. So it should be matriarchal oppression.
Yeah,
that's really all I have to say at the moment.
Well, and that's that aligns with my perceptions too. I think I made a similar comment last week about how at least the way I perceive feminism, and certainly the way it has asserted itself here recently. It presents itself, at least in my judgment, as a response to the imbalances of patriarchal system, but it asserts a equally imbalanced, focus on a feminine. It's like, making an effort to create an ultimate balance by responding to the long-term imbalance with an opposing imbalance, as opposed to pursuing balance in and of itself, and I think that, and I guess I won't hesitate to say that I see some problematic aspects for me personally in some of the presentation. I don't, yeah, and overcorrection. I don't have a problem admitting that I feel that way. I believe that there's a potential and an opportunity for all of the imbalances to be addressed in a system that promotes balance for everybody, and I kind of think that since that's the long-term objective, or at least I'm comfortable feeling that that should be the long-term objective, then I think that's what we should be working at from the outset, right? As opposed to this teeter-tottering back and forth from one extreme to the other and hoping that somehow we land in the middle. It takes a reconditioning of everybody to get us there, because the attitudes that condition thinking in a patriarchal system create women who advance it as well. So it's not just men who need to be, reprogrammed, it's women who need to be reprogrammed. So, if we pursue a balanced system for everybody, I think we'll get there quicker. And that's kind of what I see in Africana womanism. I wanted to, I was planning to start this presentation of Dr. Weems' work at 6:30. So if we have anybody else who wants to offer some input or share some reflection on what they read or understand about this topic, then we certainly like to hear that. If not, I can just go ahead and share Dr. Wing's work.
Bargani, everyone. I am in agreement with a lot of what everyone has said, but what I want to have addressed or have a question is, what is balance? With there being the, I forget how you put it, but the whole idea that there's an imbalance, where do you start in terms of a balance? Is it the just the roles, or the our upbringings? What's the balance? What do you mean by balance?
Well, I guess what I mean really would be probably perhaps best understood, by looking at or articulating the oppression that women are facing right now, because I'm talking about addressing all of that, not just to correct it or end it, but to then establish a structure that responds to that in a way, where it should be, and whatever the issue may be. I mean, my thinking in the but perhaps in the simplest term to capture the full idea is for us to evolve to the point of understanding each other in our fullness as divine beings. We don't have that in the broadest sense right now in this culture. Most people embrace a God concept that articulates itself or presents itself in the masculine, and women are as comfortable with that as men are. I think in a big way that contributes to us not being able to see the full divinity in women, and leaning towards this male, orientation that we have. So in the broadest sense, to try to answer the question concisely, I mean, I'm talking about a full recognition for women, for who women are, and having that be reflected throughout every aspect of society. That's what the balance means to me. First, correcting the nonsense that's going on, but then building a structure that truly recognizes you all for who you are and allowing you to be occupy the space at the level that we need for you all to occupy if we're going to ascend to our highest potential as a species. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, I appreciate that, Suja. And with that being said, there's a lot of alphabet soup that goes into that mix, because I think even with the generation of today and what's growing up, there's a whole lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And if there's going to be a beginning to begin, I think it has to start with our current generations, because they don't know a mountain from a molehill. Yeah. So I think, again, for this balance, we have to have some ground rule of what it is we think, because they already think we're outdated and already put to pasture. So I think what information we would have to offer, they would consider nonsense unless we could be able to truly give them a visual, because I'm visual, and I think the visual is better than anything else, in where to begin, if that makes sense.
It does, and I agree. And Sarah, I'm gonna come to you in just a second. I think it requires at the beginning some clear ideas, right? Clear ideas that can be readily consumed, towards molding, them in the way that we want. But it has to be something that they can receive or that they will receive. So not only does the message have to be one that would land well on their ears, but it has to be packaged and presented in a way that appeals to their senses.
Correct.
So, you know, we gotta do all of that. And I think that's kind of why we're having this discussion in a sense, because as I said, we got to begin with some clear ideas, you know, and this type of thought work that's been put into this, I think, is an excellent foundation, you know, for building the type of, you know, effort that it would take to inform, you know, our young people about, you know, the highest possible conception of what it means to be them, you know, talking about the young women here while we're having this discussion tonight. And, you know, is great potential in doing exactly that. Sarah, what were you going to say there?
Well, now, okay, I kind of lost it a little bit, but I know it was started with what Akir said, and then it was, I decided not to say anything, and then Kathy brought up something similar. So Akir had mentioned that it seems like things are in the other direction now. It's going too far.
Yeah.
Like, instead of being equal, and what is that really, is kind of going like a matriarchic society instead. Yeah. I necessarily think that is true, but I used to feel that exact same way when I was a younger person. And now I see it more as trying to balance. But what Kathy said about, well, how do you get the balance, is it isn't doing the opposite. I don't think that's working. I don't think that's going to work either. But I do think having individuals, the independence that Akir had mentioned, not to put anyone down, not to say that women are higher than men or anything like that, but having women just be the best that they can be independently, I think that does somehow will eventually create some type of balance, because people can depend on each other and work from each other after that. I don't think we can start from men being at the top and women being at the bottom, and then said, okay, and now we're just going to do this thing where we're equal. But equal is really just like, it's not necessarily you're doing the exact same thing, because people don't really need that. Kind of need to balance each other out. But I think it's a way to find the balance if people are independently them. It's kind of like, instead of each person bringing 50% to the table, each person brings 100% to the table. Everybody's 100%.
100% of what of the best of what you have to bring.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of the women not being allowed in certain spaces, I think all of those barriers and misconceptions and ideas, and sorry, Sarah, if you hadn't finished, I have this way of interrupting, so I've been told. So
you are a Black mother, so you know, go and do you.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt her thought, because I know sometimes how that you have a lot you want to say, but someone interrupts and then it kind of shortens the thought process.
I said it all that I wanted to, so thank you.
Okay, but I agree with that, because the whole idea of, I think where we've gotten it twisted, is that this idea that the woman that feels she can roar is muted. And then you have this idea that because physically this is this woman, that they don't have the same abilities, capabilities, and so on and so forth. So I totally agree. Coming 100% of who you are into the mix, into whatever space that is where you have to begin to start looking at a balance.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Whatever that means. And there's a lot of getting used to moving over and creating space that men will have to adapt to if we are truly honest about letting women come in and be their best.
And that's just what I was trying to say from what Akir said. It's not supposed to try to lean so much the other way. It's more just like, hey, get yourself, be completely independent, know what you want how you can take care of yourself, and then you can be, you can do that thing with somebody else. But you really have to have it together yourself.
Well,
first.
It's better for everybody when everybody is individually at their best, right? At least that's the way I see it. I never understood this whole idea of second-class citizenship for women. I mean, don't the men lose out on something with that? It would seem to me that they do. But I guess, I won't pretend to be able to relate to the people who have a pathological need to feel like they're dominant over other people. I can't relate to that. But nevertheless, as I mentioned, Dr. Hudson Weems, Clenora Hudson Weems, I should pull up her website. I gotta show y'all her face. Let me do that. I can do that. Let me get to that right quick. And she's got several videos too. We only have an hour, so I didn't try to put together a presentation on this because I'm gonna go through this list of 18 characteristics. But I do want to show you all her, at least her face. Here, let me see. The University of Missouri. Yeah. Open this up some, and then share. So this is Dr. Clenora Hudson Weems. She's still an active professor at of English in the College of Arts and Science at the University of Missouri, and the leading theorist on Africana Womanism, as I mentioned. So I just wanted to share that right quick, show her face, and I'm reading from her book, Africana Womanism: Reclaiming Ourselves. She lists 18 characteristics that define what it means to be an Africana womanist. And I'm gonna just go through them real quick to just show the depth of thought. I think just by mentioning the characteristics without even having a depthful discussion about how she defined each gives some perspective on the depth of thought, and even not, and clearly the cultural orientation, but the overall way a Africana womanist positions herself and sees herself and relates to the world. So these characteristics are, first, she says that Africana womanist is a self-namer. Of course, we understand what that means, naming herself in all of her roles and identities. She's a self-definer, defines her reality. And of course, there's a broad perspective to that, and the history to that, to women defining their own reality, and a lot to be said about that. Number three, she is family-centered. And I found it so key that came up third, after self-naming and self-defining. I mean, that's the foundation of understanding what it means to be who Africana womanist is, and then going right to family-centered next, and that centers an identity of Africana womanist in family, right? 4, in concert with males in struggle, right? As a distinction from the feminists, which is, I mean, they certainly allow men to participate, but I don't think it would be fair to say that the feminist movement is oriented to be fully in concert with males in the way that Africana womanism is in this context. Next, there are flexible roles within the Africana womanist tradition, as she explains. She says here, this is a controversial topic today due to the predicament of the Africana man and woman, which dates back to our enslavement. And then she discusses a bit more about the way flexible roles is discussed in the feminist tradition, the way roles are discussed in that. And of course, there are some specific aspects of the roles of women that feminism takes issue with. Next characteristic is that there is a genuine sisterhood among Africana womanists, among Africana womanists. And they understand that as being essential to their existence and all of their efforts, any level, in any way, right? And I've said before that women working together in harmony. How did I say that? I got to think of that clever little quote I used to say. But somehow giving recognition to the benefits that we have experienced and enjoy when women are working together in harmony, you know, either as sisters or comrades, whatever the case may be. When women are working together in harmony, good things happen. Next characteristic is strength. And there's undeniably a strength about what it means to be a Black woman. We were just talking about that last week in one of its presentations. So that's a characteristics. And related to being compatible with men in struggle, an Africana woman is male compatible in general, right? That speaks to that orientation and the traditional understanding of gender roles and family and things. Next characteristic, Africana womanists are respected and recognized, right? I mean, and it's easy to do a takeoff on how this culture and Western culture and European culture in general, and even other cultures outside of Europe, teach a secondary conception of what it means to be woman and role, where women aren't respected and recognized in the same way that men are. Well, of course, you know, we have examples in the most ancient African cultures where women enjoy the highest standing of the ancient world, right? So we take pride in that being a component of the best of what it means to be African and human, and certainly that's what's reflected in what it means to be respected and recognized as a characteristic of Africana womanism. The next characteristic is an Africana womanist is whole and authentic. Say that again, whole and authentic. Man, and that just rings my ears about a discussion that I had with my wife earlier today, talking about Kevin Samuels and his engagement with women and their pursuit of relationships and everything that goes along with that. And of course, that led to a discussion about confusion, crazy standards, false expectations, and all kinds of things that are part and parcel to the confusion that this culture breeds into women and people in general about who we are, challenging this notion of being whole and authentic. You know, there's some people out there you never get to meet the real person. You find yourself dealing with their representative. You know, that was something that I talked about constantly when I was in my dating life. So the idea of being whole and authentic, I see as a response and a balancing effort towards the fake and superficial way of engaging the world that so many people have adopted as a function of this society. And then the next characteristic is spirituality, that a African womanist has an innate spirituality, you know, that is applied, measured, exercised, and developed as a component of her overall being, right? And anybody who knows anything at all about African culture or Black people knows that spirituality is innate to us. It's a part of who we are. Spirituality here could also be interpreted as a distinction from religion, organized religion here, which has taken those spiritual tendencies and sort of exploited them, you know, as a tool of colonialism and oppression. But spirituality as a characteristic of African womanism is a departure.
Where in the world is pretty much San Diego?
Next characteristic, and I should have numbered.
Yeah, but you can go down.
I have them numbered in my notes from my study group presentation, but I didn't number them on this material I prepared here today. But I'm coming to, I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that 4 more? So I guess this is the 14th one. An Africana womanist is respectful of elders, right? And we know that that's part and parcel to African culture, best of African culture, respect for elders. Next characteristic, an Africana womanist is adaptable. And we know, that's a trait of Black women, adaptive. They have an adaptive vitality, unlike any other group of human beings on earth, as far as I'm concerned. And, I don't think I have to prove that to anybody on this call. And then adaptable, and then ambitious, right? Sisters are ambitious, doing great things out here, accomplishing great things, and consistent with the focus on family, the centering in family. An Africana womanist is mothering and nurturing, not afraid of that perception of women as being nurturers and soft and mothering and all of that kind of stuff, in a way that, as I understand it, there's some resistance to that, or some, I would say, to offer them the best take on it, some evolving beyond that, or expanding beyond that in the feminist tradition. And then, as a summation, she says, and I'm gonna just read this as a summation. She says, these are the key features of the true Africana womanist. They are important in bringing about a holistic existence for herself and her family. The establishment, then, of the concept of Africana womanism, which simply outlines what has always been a reality for Africana women, is long overdue. It is a critical concept that could possibly resolve much of the conflict existing between Africana men, women, and children. In addition, if fully realized, it could conceivably short circuit the growing tension between Africana men and women. This could hopefully foster a better sense of harmony and unity for the creation of a better world for all today and in the future. And those are the words of Queen Mother, Dr. Clenora Hudson Weems. What did you all think about that list of 18 characteristics? What do you think about this framing of of Africana womanism as a departure or distinction from your understanding of Africana womanism? From feminism, Black feminism, I should say.
Can I offer a perspective?
Please.
It's going to be a little far out there, maybe not, but I think that because of the people in my generation and how far gender identity and stuff has been discussed, and the idea of it being so fluid, I think it's really hard to discuss or even think of an idea of feminism or femininity, because it seems like in my group, it's just pick what you want. And not say that people are free to feel however they want to, but it's kind of the idea of thinking of it as a spectrum of male and female on the spectrum. It's even more difficult to decide to define what it means to be female, because it's not about any physical feature. It's just about how you feel. And it's really confusing to me because I'm a male and I've always accepted that I am, but I have no idea what it feels like to be male. I wouldn't be able to tell you because it's just what I am. And being male is not a part, for me personally, I don't think of it as a part of a like culture. And I know that there's where you're born that defines what you consider to be masculine traits and such, but I have no idea what it means to feel male, and I can't even think of the idea. I can't conceive the idea of what it feels like to be male or female or neither. It's kind of strange to me. Um, so when it comes to the idea of feminism, and with the discussion we're having right now, I think that it's important to have a goal in what we're to make an outline or a goal to achieve the things that we feel would be beneficial to women, because we talked about the things, and I think we all can agree with that what's currently going on isn't working. It's not working. What worked before didn't work, as far as like the oppressing women, but now the idea of having gender hate isn't working either. But I'm really concerned with how can we take the idea from the conversation from theory to practical application, and people living by these things, when women don't have an idea of what it means to be a woman because they don't care. It's a spectrum thing. They feel like a lot of people, depending on how they dress that day, they're more masculine, or that's what gender my understanding of people who are gender fluid, what they're wearing that day can sway how they feel. So how can I tell you what you are or how can we define what it is to be a woman if you don't really have something that's static or something that's not changing?
I'd like to chime in if I may. So as a father of someone who is trans, and my position on it, honestly, is I don't even know. Like at the end of the day, I make my greatest effort to try to understand and grasp. I have a lot of parallel ideologies or perspectives as a kid. But one of the key things that I've come to understand, regardless of the perspective or the position, when it comes to that the approach to that topic or the subject, it's rooted in respect. And the core of it is really essentially that the person, regardless of what they identify as, is asking to be recognized and appreciated, or rather respected under the value that they want to, quote unquote, identify as. I agree with Akir though in terms of waking up one day and your identity is as fluid as whatever you feel like dressing as for that day. I do think it does not give you a proper foundation of really truly establishing your identity of who you are. You have to pick who you are. You can never just be anything outside of your feelings, or you can't base your identity based on. I don't believe that personally, but I definitely thought what stood out to me in the tenets that were listed was the roles, and it made me think about how many mothers had to be stepping up in the role as I hate to say it this way, but as the father, but because I don't think that that's necessarily a full-on task that can be accomplished, but be that as it may, it is a role that she had to actually try to counterbalance, so to speak. And understanding what we bring to the table, whether your identity is male or female or masculine or feminine, it essentially gets lost in this whole new movement of misunderstanding where your line of respect begins and your line of respect ends and my line of respect begins, and vice versa. That portion, I think, is the real anchor on what all around it seems to be prevalent with people, trying to approach this counterbalance of oppression, or just overall antagonism towards patriarchy, or overall the way society operated, so to speak. And I think that, like, if we really get geared our focus on not only the respect, but really just, I love the way that you worded that, Brother Suja, is harmony. Is that, like, it's not about like, oh, well, since you did me this way, now I got to do you that way, so that it is tit for tat. It's literally about the harmony, which eye for an eye just makes everybody blind, right? And I definitely think that we're really focused on really trying to figure out what works. It has to be what works for everybody, and there has to be a balance and a harmony of what you're doing to provide for the collective. And that's the other thing I think is getting lost too. It's becoming more about the individual. I. This is how I feel. This is what I want. You want. This is what I think you should be talking to me as, instead of understanding that you're a part of this process. You are not the process, or the process does not conform to you. You have to conform to the process. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. But it's certainly a challenging issue to say the least. Whenever I do have dialogues with my oldest, I mean, we're good. You know, we don't have like full on like arguments or debates, because I really come from a place of love, and I want to listen, and I want to get perspective. Like, why do you feel this way? Why? Where are you coming from? And then I just kind of stand firm and respect. Like, I don't agree with it, but I respect that that's what you want. This is your life. You live your way, and you have your say in how you carry yourself. But just know that, like, if you want me to be your champion, I might not be it, but I'll be there. If somebody try to get out of pocket with you, I got your back. And that's really the core of, I think, what we always have to have, especially in the Black community, is regardless of how we don't see eye to eye, we always have to have the support of each other. Yeah. Correct in private, praise in public.
Well, I think it's almost impossible to present an idea that would offer any structure, individual or collective, to somebody who buys into the idea that the core of their being can change, from one day to the next based on a mood, or the clothing they feel like wearing and all of that. So I find it difficult to even relate some of what I've heard from the current movements, the gender identity movements and that stuff.
I agree.
This it's so difficult to do that. I mean, to stick to the Africana Womanism, we're gonna go past 7, and just since it's just us, we'll just continue this as the closed meeting. I'm comfortable saying, without having thoroughly revisited this material ahead of this meeting, I'm very comfortable saying that Africana Womanism, as it's described here, has no problem recognizing people's right to be who they are, and to be rightfully respected, and everything, and who they assert themselves to be in the world. But at the same time, I believe if we take a position, a cautious position in the very least, about some of the societal things that contribute to those traditional gender roles not being once what they once were, in some respect. You know what I mean? I don't want to overstate what I perceive here, but at the same time, I think in the simplest terms, people are rightfully respected. All people are rightfully respected in an Africana Womanist context. But at the same time, I believe that there would be no problem asserting the primacy of the traditional gender roles, because of course even all LGBTQ, I think they add an A or everything. I want to make sure I'm representing everybody respectfully. All of them come into existence through a male and female coming together in harmony. At one of the discussions that we had on these topics at my study group in Long Beach, I had a contingency of lesbians come in and try to take over the whole meeting. one of the points they wanted to make was that, we got science these days, and science equalizes the playing field to some degree. And I had to point out to them that even your science requires a sample from a man and a woman, even if, you create life that's born to two women or two men, you got to have a male and female principle that come together.
That part. You will never be able to produce an egg from a man who was born a man and never be able to produce sperm from a woman who was born a woman.
I mean, I said to her that I don't really think you help your cause by trying to suggest that the what we call the heterosexual union is not, at the foundation of what it means to be human. That's not to say acknowledging that doesn't imply that you shouldn't be fully respected in who you are. But, we're kidding ourselves if we can't acknowledge that woman and man coming together in harmony is at the foundation of what it means to be human. And I got her to back away from that a little bit, at least one of them. They were a cold bunch, man. I lost my voice in there talking to them that day. So yeah, it gets complex and confusing, but I believe, consistent with what I read from her in her closing, this perspective does offer a focus that does leave some of the more vocal contingencies out there right now. It doesn't represent them, or doesn't represent some of their primary moves as agenda items. It focuses on, I would say, what it takes to build community in the fullest sense. And it takes healthy families to build communities, right? So I think that's where it comes from. Brother Dr. Quayle?
Yes, very rich discussion here. Going back to the list, to the items that you discussed from Dr. Weems, and bringing in some of this other discussion, which is very, very good. There are roles in just about any large, complex social organization. There are roles. There are things that have to be done in a certain way at certain times in order for the social organization to function efficiently. So there is no real dispute about roles or the existence of roles. I think a lot of a solution-oriented focus goes in part to who performs those roles, who occupies those roles, and where there are considerations of compensation, pay, money, this complicates it, and our solutions to the value that we give to the persons that are fulfilling a particular role. I have discovered, that I can clean the floor, better than my wife. And my wife has some mechanical skills that come easier to her than they come to me. So should my value be diminished if I clean the floor? Should her value be elevated because, you know, she changes a doorknob? I think that, you know, that as we resolve these kind of questions, we will move in the direction of some solutions to all of this. But then it also has to involve, and this is a very important point, the fact that that you need a society, you need a social organization that comprises both men and women. The women will say, I don't need the man, I just need his sperm. Well, I just have to say, sister, if you're gonna have the man's sperm, you're gonna need the man there. So, so we can't get away from that fundamental fact that that you need sperm, you need an egg in order for the social organization to continue. So, so with regards to that list, I'm listening to the list, and I'm thinking about, okay, there are roles associated here, and to me a key question is, who fulfills those roles and what value do we give to those people?
Can I make a follow-up comment to that?
Sure.
I like that I like that Dr. Quilley spoke about the list of 18 characteristics, and I want to say that two characteristics that the final two, I'm not sure if I got them in the same order as you did, but the final two characteristics that I caught were mothering and nurturing. And I've noticed that it's a huge thing right now, where those are things that I know a lot of young women are not interested in at all. The idea of it is horrible and disgusting. That's why birth control is at all-time high. And I know a lot of my peers who talk about using birth control, for example, and they talk about all the negative side effects of it, but they feel like that's a necessary thing that they need to do. Some of them who aren't even engaging sexually, but it's the idea of motherhood, or having to be responsible to nurture either a baby or an adult in a relationship, is disgusting to them. And the idea where Brother Quayle was talking about, where he says that he can clean the floors better and she has better mechanical aptitude with things. When it comes to right now, we have a society where there's a lot of women who don't want to do mothering or nurture. Well, men are extremely bad, naturally, scientifically, at nurturing. I was actually reading a study the other day talking about the correlation between testicle size and how bad a parent is. And they were talking about how if men know that when you have children and you're not active in their lives, by every statistic, your child is more likely to have a bad life. Why is it that there's men who will have children all over the world? I mean, all over the world, there's men who have children that they won't be a part of their lives. And they were talking about that in testosterone level. So it seems like there's a thing. Naturally, men aren't very good at nurturing. So women who already have they're naturally more likely to be better nurturers, and they don't want to do it. If you don't want to wash the floor, and your wife doesn't want to change the doorknob, who's going to do it? And in this case, I'm saying, who's going to nurture the children or raise the children, if that's like the basis of what our future and what our society will be? How is it possible?
It's alone. They don't want to do it alone. That's what it is. It's not doing it at all. So they just say they don't want to do it because they're imagining alone, because they're going by what they see and what's expected of them.
Yeah. And also, you know, given the reality of, you know, decades and centuries and millennia of patriarchy, they're not seeing a fair return for mothering and nurturing, you know. And as we were having this discussion, it made me think for a moment that it might be appropriate to have an Africana manism component counterpart to this, because men have some responsibility in where we are, and absolutely some responsibility in restoring the balance that needs to be reduced to the same level of clarity, you know,
Preach.
with expressions of, you know, how we are to outwardly seek to address these issues of restoring balance, and it would be key for that to include a clear statements and positions on how we see ourselves in relation to women and how we relate to women, and what women, you know, mean to us as not just partners in love and life, but, you know, partners in building the world that we want to live in. You know, there's a whole lot of that patriarchal conditioning in the movement, right? The history of the Black Power movement and the Civil Rights movement and all of that is heavily laden with all of that. So the next round of activism, man-centered activism, most certainly should be called to clarify its position and the role that it's going to take to actively restore the balance in the terms that we've been talking about tonight. Sister Sarah, you got a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say that I agree that that definitely would help with balance, is having something comparable, like you called it menism. But also I wanted to respond to Ikea just to make sure I understood what he was saying. You were talking about young women your age, right? Like
Yes.
Gen Z, basically.
My age,
And I
maybe
was
10 years older as well.
okay. And that's the reason I made the comment and said they're imagining doing it alone, and that's not what they want to do, is because that's what's expected now. I read this book a couple years ago, awesome book, The History of Marriage. And the reason people got married is very different for the reason people get married now. And a lot of it had to do, not even the first, maybe secondary, but somewhere in there, a part of it was some type of protection or something that you're getting in return. But currently, it is basically like a free ride, like for the man. The woman is expected to work outside and then come home like she doesn't have a job and still do all of the other things and then throw in kids and other things. And young women now look at that like, why would anybody get into that? Like, what am I getting out of that? Just in talking to my students, and they aren't quite as old as you, but they're all between 16 and 18 years old, and they are uninterested, generally speaking, because of that reason right there. They're always like, well, what? And it's not even, and they see it's not even with their parents, they see it's not even. They're like, my mom does all of this, my dad works outside the home, and it's not, there's no balance, and that's the problem, the lack of balance.
Yeah.
I think
Can I respond to Sarah? No, I just want to I want to associate myself with those remarks, my sister. You put it well. There's a lack of balance in a relationship that requires or that expects. I don't know. There's a big difference between requires and expects, but where one person, by virtue of their sex, can have the expectation, have the requirement of doing more than the other person. That is inherently out of balance. And it is also revealing of how transactional our relationships have come. And I kind of stumbled when I said our because because I'm not part of that generation, that particular mindset, but I certainly see in the media where relationships are transactional. It's what do I have to put in compared to what I'm going to get out, and there is little balance there, particularly where African American, well, not just African American, but here I'm going to use the racial term and say where Black women, where African women are concerned, and so yes, we have to begin to redefine a lot of stuff, which Malcolm comes to mind saying that we literally have to change the language in order to be in a position of being our own liberators. Because as long as we are using the oppressor's language, we are going to, on some level, mimic that oppression, and the imbalance in transactional relationships is certainly one of the places where that craziness is prominent.
Agree with that wholeheartedly.
Sarah, did you have or Bill? You got your hand up.
Yes. I am not familiar with the text that Sarah cited, but it seems quite imbalanced relative to what I've heard from relatively happy marriages and from people who, when divorced, remarried. Again, being single can have its own challenges, and being paired can help. So I'm not really attuned to such a severe imbalance of work that you would reject the institution altogether. I do believe that we are grandly failing in helping people marry well, in helping people group well, in helping people come together to do anything, much less find mates, which is a life mates, which is a more complicated challenge than most.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
on the question of getting relationships, I mean, we are the problems that we're having, I think, can be expressed in cultural terms. I think, we are in this society and following traditions that aren't even working for the people who define it. The marriage rate and the failure rate and all of that stuff, that's not just Black people and Black people relationships who are failing at the level that they are in this society. It's everybody in this society. I've said before that the way that marriage is done here is one of the most how have I said that? One of the most destructive things that happen to relationships in this society, period. And I think that's reflected in the numbers. This text that I'm reading from here in its construction of this notion of Africana womanism is making an appeal for us to return to our traditional understanding, or at least at a minimum, to draw from the best of our cultural understanding of what it meant to be man, woman, husband, and wife. Woman in this context, centered in family and community, as a departure from what we have been doing, that brings us and our community to the current state that we find ourselves in. And certainly nobody in their right mind could suggest that as a general statement or general rule, that our relationships are where they need to be. You know, I mean, I was for a short time member of Crash Unity Center down here, Brother Bill. That's somewhat of a sister organization to WOSE, where you're minister up there, and you know, in the Bay Area. And I was going there believing that, you know, I would be amongst people who would be building on the best of African ideals and things, you know, and the centered around the understanding of harmonious relationships between men and women. But even there was open discussion about this supposed war battle between, you know, the genders, the men and the women. And it, you know, it wasn't real in the fullest sense, but that was certainly played up there. And I only point that out to say that that level of confusion exists among us, but it's been bred into us, you know, and even in some instances where we're you know, trying to reconnect with that influences, when we're trying to reconnect with the best of our African culture tradition, that influence is still there. And I offer that experience at Crass as an example of that. But I think that's that speaks to the need to, you know, get out of their way of thinking, get out of their way of doing things. And, you know, it doesn't mean fully just going back in time to doing things exactly as the way our ancestors did. One of the things that I like about Kawaida as a philosophy is that it encourages us to be grounded in an understanding of the best of what our ancestors have done, but also have recognize a responsibility to look at that from where we are today and draw the best from that and add our own to it, you know, to come up with the best way of going forward and doing things today. So I hope I haven't rambled too long or gotten too far off course, but I see this as a cultural, as a reflection of the cultural battle that we have been in. A lot of us don't even know what's going on, right? But certainly a call for Africana womanism is a direct appeal to that.
You did finally get closer to where I am. I don't really have much faith in the generalities, but what I do see is a sort of invisible hand that always opposes our unity of any kind, even our personal relationships and pair bonding and marriages and such. That is, what I see in the US is that the economy, businesses, corporations make a mint off of our separation. Yeah. They basically sell us stuff to kind of interact with each other. And it turns out that when we actually pair up with each other and when we join with each other, we buy less. So they're not interested in that.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I don't mean to beat up on Progressive Insurance alone, but you know, they're the most brazen, saying don't be like your parents. Well, if we leave that message uncountered, then we see, you know, poor ideation among our young people and not a good sort of understanding of marriages that last a long time and are very, very supportive. Even though, you know, repeatedly, if you're willing to look, if you ask those folks who've been married 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they'd say nothing is more valuable to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If I can respond to Bill, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I did a content analysis of MTV. And I was inspired to do this by the fact that my children were coming into their adolescence at that time, and MTV was very popular. And one of the things that it just jumped out. It wasn't really cloaked well. They weren't really trying to cloak it, but it was in your face, as you put in the chat, Bill. But MTV was actively, intentionally, and kind of intensely, repeatedly with a message that your parents aren't cool, don't listen to them. And so those adolescents then are the parents of the adolescents now, and that message of not respecting your parents, which to me goes hand in hand with not respecting parenthood, had some effect and influence. And just speculation, as I'm rambling on here, I wonder how those issues affecting the 40-something parents now go hand in hand with some of the gender challenging ideas that are rich and ripe right now. And so I'm appreciating what you said, Bill, and just pointing out that I can attest to in the early 90s, MTV was actively promoting the idea of, don't listen to your parents, don't want to be like them.
Yeah.
Just to add one more to that corporate mischief and ISFET theme, corporations seem always to focus on hypersexuality also, and on combat between sexes. Until just maybe 5 years ago, okay, maybe 10, I never saw any Black woman on the screen who wasn't a harpy, who wasn't always fighting with her man, who wasn't unreasonable. Never saw any Black men who were really supportive of their children until just maybe the last decade. I mean, you could see a few things produced by Denzel, produced by Spike, where there were real whole people there. But, up through the early 90s, all I saw was friction. So don't be surprised what you get when that's the media that we're fed constantly.
Yeah, we know where we are, and here is fair. It's a true statement that, true Black love is the most revolutionary act, for us to actually practice it and sustain it, goes against the desires of this system in this society at its foundation and every level from there, yeah, there's much to be said on that. We could have a whole, when I was running the study group, the single most popular topic were relationships. So, if we want to have a discussion that focuses on relationships, then that has potential for public interest. Those discussions were always the most well attended and well received. We up the 7:29 wrap up minute here on this. I want to thank you all again. And I thank you all on behalf of y'all, because we in this together and support each other in it. So on behalf of everybody, I thank everybody for y'all continuing to chime in on this. I know Dr. Jamil has said she wasn't interested in these types of thought processes and identity things that didn't get to the heart of the issues going down on the street. And I wish she had been able to sit in tonight. I think she may have been surprised that there is a bit of that in this and a bit more depth than you get from some of the other, how would I describe them, list-based identity systems and things that you might find out there. But nevertheless, I think this was an excellent discussion. I want to thank you all for participating. Thank you for your ideas. You remind me that it's a wonderful thing to have smart friends, right? It helps to alleviate some of the frustration that comes from not having the time and the opportunity to learn everything myself. You know, get on the connection with my smart friends and have an informed conversation and learn something, you know, and walk away feeling better as a result of that. So on behalf of all of us, I thank y'all for participating here. And as I always say, we ain't got to go home. We got to bust up out of this joint and go on and get back to the rest of our night. So next week, we got Sarah doing a presentation on Black women's health. We'll send out the updates to get all of that into the website. And to get that listed. I'm a little bit behind on sending the videos to Akir to update the website, but I do have all of them, and they are in the editing process and on their way to him. So I'm going to try to make a point to get everything updated and have everything updated by the next week. And then we'll have a further conversation after next week about where we're going after the end of March. Okay. So with that, if any closing comments, let's hear them. Otherwise, we're about to be up out of here. All right. Well,
Good night.
Peace and blessings, everybody. Thank you for coming out again, and I look forward to seeing y'all next week.
All right. See you next week.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good night.